Hello and welcome back. So today we're going to go over rule number 2 to my fantasy hockey draft strategy, and that is to draft 2 elite defensemen. So just a little bit of background. This is a graph showing how awful I was at fantasy over the last 13 plus years, and as you can see, I didn't have a lot of success until 2018, and that's exactly when I started implementing elements of this strategy. So this is, why do you draft 2 elite defensemen? Does offense equal championships? So there's not a lot of data available for multiple leagues and who won and where they drafted and whatnot. So I went back to my own league, the personal league that I'm in, and went back 4 years and just did an analysis here. Does the team with the best offense win? So you look at this past season, AC Delaware River, 66% of the time he won the offensive categories in Yahoo Fantasy. That's a standard league with your 10 categories. You have 6 basically offensive categories, 4 goaltending categories. He won 66% of the offensive ones. He won the league. If you look 2021, he was the champion again. He beat me in the championship. And if you look down here, this is the combined category win percentage. This is both goaltending and offense. So I had extremely good goaltending that year. So I was way above everybody else down here, but I only had 50% offensive category win percentage. Delaware River had 57%. So he had the better offense, and he ended up winning in the championship game because of that. You go back another year. I had by far and away the best offense, and I won the league. You go back one more year, and this is where it gets a little dicey because this league we transitioned. We used to do plus minus, then we ended up doing blocks. So the Moose winning this had a lot to do with plus minus, but if you look at who's at the top of the league for the regular season, it was Wolfish. He had the best offense, and he was number 1 in the league in the regular season. He ended up number 2 because he lost in the championship. But if you notice, the opposite works as well. If you look at Rivercats, 35% of his offensive categories, look where he is, 9th. He's not doing too good there. 19-20, Ottawa Truckers, abysmal, 23%, down at the bottom of the league. You look at 2021, who's down here? Zodiac Braves, 20%. That's even worse. He's down here. He ended up 10th in the regular season, 9th overall. I guess he won a playoff or a non-playoff game. And then Wolfish, 34%. That's not as bad, but he ended up finishing 10th. So if you take a look at this, offense typically does equal championships. And what's going to put you over the top when it comes to your offense is your defenseman that you're drafting, because you have all of your offensive spots are taken up by players that your Matthews here, your Huberdeau, Kachuk, etc. But if you take a look at, this is Delaware River. Let me pull this up again. He was the guy who won our league. So if you take a look at, didn't want that. I wanted assists. So Delaware River, this is one of the offensive categories. He had a lot of help from his defense. He had Victor Hedman leading the way with 65 assists. And he had Mo Sider up here as well. He had Aaron Ekblad up here as well. The same kind of went for me. I had 2 of the best defensemen in the league. I had Yossi, 73 assists. I had Makar with 58 assists. And for me, it went even further. It went to goals. If you look at goals, Cale Makar had 28. Yossi had 23. Those were the top 2 goal-scoring defensemen. So these are the guys that are going to put you over the top in your offensive categories, which gives you a better chance of winning. But what do you want to look for when you're trying to find that elite defenseman? So this is an analysis I did of, it's basically the defenseman point per game or per game averages for points, shots, power play, and it goes back a couple years, back to 18-19. So what you can see here, you want one of these guys who's going to put up a lot of points. That's pretty obvious. Your Yossi's, Makar, Hedman, Fox, Ekblad, etc. Typically, these guys all are quarterbacks of elite power plays. So if you look at the power play data, you see the same names: Hedman, Yossi, Makar, Fox. But the kicker here is not every one of these guys who quarterbacks an elite power play shoots the puck. Adam Fox, for example, he's averaging around 2 shots a game. He's not on this list. In fact, you see a lot of different names on this list: Hamilton, Werenski, Chychrun, Shabbat, Petrangelo. Some of these guys do quarterback power plays, and they are efficient at getting the puck to the net, but they're not putting all of those together. What you want to do, you want to find somebody who's going to be able to get you points, power play points, and shots, because shots is the kicker. We'll come back to goals in a little bit because that's another a little bit of an anomaly. But shots is the difficult one that you want to find. If you want a defenseman who's going to get you all four of those categories, you're gonna want to go to this analysis right here. This is defensemen who have put up half a point per game, who have they're in the top 10th percentile in shots and in power play points. So this is that metric basically. The guys who put up points on the power play and shoot the puck. There's not that many of them. Ekblad, Makar, Letang, Riley, Josi. These are their shot numbers here. This is their point per game average. This is their power play points average. And if you go back, you'll see a lot of the same names. You'll see some other names. Ekblad's here. Hamilton. This was Hamilton when he was on Carolina, so he was way more prolific. I would look for a bounce back season from him. Chychrun shot the puck a ton that particular year. That was the year that he had his coming out party. Josi's on this list 4 times. He's all over this list. So that's a guy you want to, be paying attention to. And this year I got him at like 58 in the draft. So you want to pay attention to the guys who are on this list. These are the guys who are going to quarterback a power play. They're going to put up points and they're going to shoot the puck. So these are the guys. You have Josi's on here 4 times. Letang's on here 3 times. Hedman's on here basically 3 times. He barely missed this past year. He only had 2.6 shots per game, a little bit under this. He wasn't in the top 10th percentile, but he was right there. John Carlson, he's on here twice. Erik Karlsson's on here twice, if you can see down here at the bottom. This was the last year in Ottawa and the first year in San Jose. He was still pretty prolific on the power play and shooting the puck as well. Cale Makar's not on here a ton because he wasn't in the league, but he's obviously a guy that you're going to want to target. And then Brent Burns is on here twice. That was, again, around the same time frame as Karlsson. And to be honest with you, for this year for San Jose, it depends on who's quarterbacking the power play, because both of them are still fantasy relevant depending on who quarterbacks the power play. But these are the guys you're going to want to look for when you're trying to find that first defenseman that you draft. These are the guys that are going to, boost you over the top with your offensive production numbers. So what about goals? Why didn't I mention goals before? Well, goals is a little bit different, as we're about to see. It did it again. Switch to desktop layout. Okay, so you see some of the same names: Makar, Josi, Hedman, Karlsson, Ekblad, but you also see a couple other names. So Justin Falk is not a guy you would have expected to see there. Gostisbehere, Shea Theodore, Pietrangelo, Taves, Dobson, Dahlin, all these guys, they scored a pretty decent amount of goals for a defenseman. Here's the per game leaders. So some of these guys got hurt. Adam Boquist surprisingly put up a decent amount of goals per game. Erik Karlsson was up there close to that. Michael Stone, he didn't play a lot of games. That's kind of an anomaly, statistically speaking. Bowen Byram's a guy to look for, despite the fact that he doesn't quarterback that power play, and he probably will never quarterback that power play. But he did put up a decent amount of goals, even it's a short sample size. But there's, what you want to take away from this is the guys at the top of this list are the exact same guys that were here. Ekblad, Makar, Letang, Josi, these guys, Hedman, these are the guys that are leading the goals per game, the defensive goal leaders. These are the same guys. But if you don't get one of those 4 or 5 guys, then you have to kind of plan to pick a guy who's going to score goals, like a Gostisbehere, like a Taves or a Dobson. Dobson benefited from Pulock being hurt. He was on the power play for the Islanders, and the Islanders had a pretty good power play. But goals is a little bit different because you get a couple of, guys who shoot the puck like Werenski. I had him last year. He was a big shooter. He was averaging over 3 shots a game. And you can see that if you go back here, shots, Werenski's right up here, 3.1, third best in the league. Josi was number 1, and I had him as well. I also had Cale Makar, so I dominated in shots last year. But that just goes to show you that goals is a little bit different. But what you want to take away from that is there's still 4 or 5 guys at the top that are at the top of all of these lists: Josi, Makar, Hedman, Ekblad, Karlsson, etc. So where do you draft these guys? So this is just a really quick breakdown of the history of our league and where the champions drafted their defensemen. So this was the year that I won, drafted Erik Karlsson in the 3rd round, John Carlson in the 5th round, won my league. John Carlson in the 2nd round, Letang in the 6th round. That's excellent value for Letang. He won the league. Last year, Hedman in the 3rd, Ekblad in the 5th. He won the league. So there seems to be a pattern coming up here. You want to target either the 3rd round, the 2nd round, and the 6th or 5th round. It depends on your league size. We have a 10-team league, but there seems to be a pretty clear target zone for your D1. So here, these are the guys that were at the top of those lists. Cale Makar, John Carlson, Adam Fox, Victor Hedman, Dougie Hamilton. These guys up at the top, these are your D1s. There's a couple of anomalies here. Yossi, for whatever reason, he wasn't drafted high. 58 last year, ADP. He ended up 4th overall, so he jumped 54 spots. He had tremendous value. Seth Jones was decent value. Chris Letang was great value as well. He was drafted at 75. But for the most part, your D1 is going to come between 12 and 30. Typically, you're going to see Makar go at 12 or somebody, Makar might even get up into the 1st round, but then you're going to see the D runs start in the 20s, 20 to 30. That's where you get these guys going off the board. So you want to make sure by the time it hits 30, you have your first defenseman. This is your target range for your second defenseman. Now, it's pretty wide because there's a lot of variables at play. Sometimes the goalie run starts in this range, this 40s range. Sometimes 30s range is where the goalie runs happens. It depends on what happens in your league, but you can find value here with your second defenseman. If you go for Hamilton, you're going to get shots, you're going to get goals, power play production, etc. He was hurt. That's why he dropped quite a bit. Quinn Hughes, you're going to get power play, you're going to get points and assists, you're not going to get shots and goals. Same thing with Fox. Morgan Riley is a pretty safe bet. He didn't move at all. He was 52nd draft. He ended up 52nd, and he quarterbacks one of the best power plays in the league. So what you're ending up with here is you want to get maybe a Makar and a Yossi. That's what I had last year. Or a John Carlson and a Letang. Or a Hedman and a McAvoy. You want one guy in this area and one guy in this area. So these are the best power plays in the league, the top 15 power plays. If you can't get one of those guys that I just mentioned, what you want to do to look for value is find a lesser-known defenseman that's quarterbacking one of these power plays. And here's a couple of examples. And these are guys that were not drafted in that range that I just showed you. So basically, this is answering the question, can you pick these guys up off waivers? And the answer is yes, but. So in St. Louis, they had the second best power play, but they split time between Falk and Krug. I would imagine that Falk takes that spot right off the bat this season because he ended up with 16 goals last year and he did pretty well there. But you never know. He could, Torrey Krug could end up taking that spot back, or somebody could get hurt. Nobody really saw Rasmus Andersson coming and leading the Calgary power play to this position. I mean, nobody really saw him as the power play quarterback, and yet he became that, and then they had a really good power play. Noah Dobson, like I said, Pulock got hurt. He stepped in, and he did very well. He scored 13 goals, and Islanders' power play was surprisingly good for a team that was starved for offense. Mackenzie Weegar, same thing. Aaron Ekblad got injured. He came in, and he quarterbacked that power play basically until the deadline when they started using 5 forwards. But these are the things that you want to look for. If a guy gets injured on one of these power plays, hop to the waiver wire and pick up whoever's going to be filling that spot, especially if it's a long-term injury like Ekblad's was. Pulock was out for 4 to 6 weeks, I believe. Ekblad was out for a couple months. That's where you want to go and pick up one of these guys because they will get you the same stat and category coverage that the guy who got injured would give you. Maybe not as prolific, but you're going to get the same type of thing. Another thing you could do is look out for power play quarterbacks that are on teams that aren't on this list, but they get a ton of reps. Josh Morrissey in Winnipeg, he's getting a ton of reps, and he went from 379 pre-rank to ending up 96th overall, and that ended up a lot higher than some of the guys that I had. Same with Dahlin. Dahlin seems to be breaking out. He started at 218, he ended up at 74, and you wouldn't think of Buffalo as having a great power play, but they're doing pretty well with him quarterbacking it. And then, like I said before, Burns and Carlson, it depends on who plays the first power play. But there is value to be had there because these two guys were on that previous list that I showed you of the guys who were above half a point per game and the top 10th percentile in shots and power play points. So this is what you're looking for value towards the end of the draft or in waiver pickups. But to summarize this whole philosophy, you definitely need at least one defenseman in the 20 to 30 range. That's going to get you goals, That's going to get you goals, assists, power play points, and shots. You also need another defenseman in the 40 to 80 range. They might not get you goals, but they'll get you assists, power play points, and shots if you're picking a guy who quarterbacks a power play, like we mentioned before. This will allow you to win your offensive categories, and like we talked about before, if you win your offensive categories, you're more likely to win your league. If you're not going to win your league, you're more likely to finish top 3, and if you're in a paid, you're paying for money or whatever, you're going to get your money back, or you're going to make a little bit of money losing in the championship game. So hopefully this provided you with a little bit of value, and keep your eyes out. I'll be doing a couple more philosophy videos for your fantasy hockey draft as we get closer and closer to the draft. And then I'll be starting to do some spotlights and features of different players, things to look for as we come into the 22-23 season. But thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next one.